Helen, hello and welcome.
Hi, Rianne.
You've got a really cool phrase on your LinkedIn that you use to describe what it is you do. Would you care to tell us and our listeners what that is?
Yeah, so within exemplar healthcare, so I always talk about making every day better, but that is our philosophy. And that is something that is really ingrained in everything we do at Exemplar Healthcare, that we're supporting our people to have the best days they can possibly have.
I think there's something really nice as well where you say it's for people to live, not be scared of a care home, but actually see it as something really positive.
Yeah, I've spent most of my career looking after people in care homes, whether it be elderly people or younger adults. And, you know, I've met many people with lots of different relatives, friends, healthcare professionals that have supported them. And I've always felt that some people fear coming into a care home. You know, you hear such bad stories on the media, in the newspapers around care homes and abuse that happens. But actually, there is so much great work that happens. And, you know, they're there for a purpose, and we look after people right up to the end of their lives. And I've always wanted to make sure that people don't fear that.
Yeah, I think that's massive because there is this fear of not just from service users, but from relatives, from family, of people kind of going into that environment. So have that debunked is something massive. So I think that's a really worthy tagline to have.
I always keep that right close to my heart. Yeah, I do.
What kind of outcomes have you seen through your kind of digital journey so far that you're able to translate and show back to the homes, to the service users even?
Well, we have far more data available to us. And it's data that we've chosen to trend and theme every 4 weeks. And that helps us, you know, improve the outcomes for people. So, for example, if I give you an example of one of them. So we now really capture unplanned hospital admissions, okay, which we used to capture them on a spreadsheet, but actually the level of detail, it was not as rich as what you get within a system. And actually, it's around looking at those unplanned hospital admissions. It's really important to our service users, as it is to any really, but actually having to go to hospital, the impact that can have on a particular person can be quite catastrophic with some of the types of people that we support. So we particularly fixed on this particular outcome so that we can try and avoid hospital admissions, which again takes pressure off the system as well.
Yeah.
It takes pressure off the NHS, and trying to work much more proactively with the GP practices to actually avoid unplanned hospital admissions, because the impact and the outcomes for people can be really poor when people have to go to hospital. And that's not, I'm saying that they don't get great care in the NHS, but actually it's not good for their mental health. Sometimes it's not good for their physical health. They're not supported as they would be within the care home because of the staffing levels within the NHS. So that's just one area. So having all of this digital information has allowed us to really trend and theme lots of things that actually we can reduce and see better outcomes for people.
I think that's really interesting as well. You talk about reducing and doing something with that data, because the fear a lot of colleagues have is, you know, collecting data. We can collect really good data and we can have loads of dashboards, but it's actually bringing it to life and doing something with it.
It's also, we've got it, so from a central perspective, it's all there, we understand it, etc., etc. But one of the key things for me, and something that we're really on a journey within Exemplar, is helping our colleagues in the care homes to understand what it actually tells them.
Yeah.
And to become quite self-sufficient in using the systems to actually understand where their issues are, where the risks are, and then how they can respond and react to that really quickly. So currently we support centrally, but we are, as a system becomes embedded, and we've really seen this with EMAR and we're now driving this with Radar, is, you know, in the initial stages, we're really supporting the individual services to understand what it's telling them. But as we go a year into projects, post-projects, we're backing away and trying to get people to understand. So it's back to training.
Yeah.
It's going back out to services to support and coach them to understand what this information is telling them and what it means for them.
Thanks
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back. We were just talking about, weren't we, that I have done one before, but it was on the very first day of filming. So yeah, it's nice to be back, and it's a little less nerve-wracking the second time, I hope.
You were one of our very first guests, so it is brilliant to have you back. So you're responsible for people and culture at Red Healthcare. Can you tell us a little bit more about this role and some of the key things that you and your team get involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, head of people and culture is a newly created role when I joined 18 months ago now. I can't believe it's been 18 months. But yeah, we get involved in essentially anything that touches people and culture. So right through from recruitment, our employer brand, through to onboarding, the full employee life cycle, any kind of touch point that employees have with the business, which is all day, every day. Employee experience is so important. It's kind of within my remit and my team's remit to look after, to develop, to continually improve. So yeah, been in place for 18 months. There was no HR people department before I joined, but since we have doubled in size, so we've now also got Caitlin in my team, who joined almost a year ago as well. That's crazy. And she is now doing an apprenticeship as well. So she's learning everything HR from the ground up. And yeah, we've done lots. We've got lots to do, but it's an exciting role, exciting department to be part of.
I think it's really nice as well that we call it people and culture, because, historically it's always been HR, but you sort of think of HR as the, sort of the serious bit and things like that, whereas actually people and culture incorporates HR, but there's so much more to it as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely been a move away from that, like across all businesses, I think. And I think, traditionally HR was very transactional, and, before it was HR, it was personnel. It was very much admin heavy, and just, I guess it can be associated with the negative parts of the employment relationship. But that was something that, I think it was in week one that, Paul, the CEO, gave me complete autonomy and just said, what do you want to call the department? And himself and Lee, even through the recruitment process and my onboarding, culture's so important to them, that it just fit, it made sense, and it just felt a lot more, the department felt a lot more at home as soon as we were called that. So
yeah, and we've just literally touched on culture a tiny bit there, and obviously something a bit special has happened at Radar Healthcare recently. So we've been Great Place to Work certified, and not only that, we've also been Great Place to Work certified especially for tech, which is an absolutely fantastic achievement for everyone in the business. So what was involved in this process, and how did it come about?
So really, really pleased, and something there we want to shout from the rooftops. So we are certified as a great place to work, but we've placed essentially out all the other businesses that are also certified. We've placed in the top 100 workplaces in tech in the UK, which is just an amazing thing to be able to share and to celebrate internally and externally. But it was very much so in order to be certified, so it's basically the way that it works is it's done via a survey. So it's not an award entry from us as the company, it's nothing kind of from senior management, that kind of thing, although they were also included. Our accreditation is based on feedback from our teams, so it's completely anonymous survey. It's a trust index survey, so it's a really kind of clever algorithm they use to pick out all the key themes. It's completely based on feedback from our people, which makes it even more special because it's not kind of us playing lip service. Any company can say we're a great place to work, but to hear that from our people is amazing. And then for us to then, because not everybody that does the survey gets certified. You've got to reach a certain level of participation, a certain level of a score result, of course. But then to go on further than that and to benchmark in those top 100 companies from the small and the medium categories is I'm just really pleased. And it's, like I say, we knew it internally in terms of we're all really proud and we really celebrate our culture. But to have that feedback and to have the means to be able to talk about it externally is brilliant.
This week I'm speaking to Louis Worth. Louis is director at Care Research, so we're going to have a little bit of a chat about that in our first question. So Louis, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So going into obviously Care Research, do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what you do there?
Yeah, so Care Research pretty much does what it says on the tin. It's a research company that focuses exclusively on the care sector. So that involves kind of large national projects. We've done stuff with Skills for Care, we've done stuff for Look Ahead and National Association of Care and Support Workers, but it also focuses on doing research for small services to help them with their feedback, to help them gain experiences from the people they support, from staff, from family members, from partners. And it's about helping services gain really great feedback that they can use for marketing, but also now for CQC evidence as well.
So not that much then.
Yeah, just a few bits, you've got to keep busy. Yeah.
So we're going to chat a little bit about obviously the new CQC framework,
yes.
And some of the things that you've put together to kind of help providers with that change, because there's obviously a lot to deal with, isn't there?
Yeah, so I think the main thing to understand about the CQC framework is that it's a huge shift in focus from CQC. So sometimes in the past, CQC changes have been, okay, we're going to frame this a bit differently, or we're going to ask for different ideas. What we've got here is a shift not just in the organisation of kind of what CQC are looking for, but also how they're going to evidence and score and collect information from services. So we've been doing quite a lot of work on helping services just shift their thinking, first with the quality statements, and then kind of thinking about these new evidence categories they've introduced. And some of the things that we've created a Chloe prompt sheet. So this allows people to basically focus on the old Chloe prompts that are going in the bin and see how they fit under the new quality statements. We're also developing a big Excel sheet that will help services to kind of go through the scoring process, the new evidence scoring process themselves, and kind of test it out and see what their service is looking at. So those are some of the things we've been put together, along with webinars and kind of other kind of various information sheets that we've been putting through.
It's really important though, isn't it? I mean, the Chloe prompt sheet that you've just mentioned, I think that sort of thing, like you said, there's a big shift from, the Chloe to the priority statements, to the quality statements, sorry. And, to kind of have that for those that work in care, we've talked about the fact that everyone's busy, everyone's on their hamster wheels. So to kind of get off that and learn something new and really understand it.
I think one of the things, it's about time. It's about, thinking and change management is always a time process. And that's one thing that a lot of services and a lot of service managers don't have a lot of space for, which is to take time. So we're trying to do some of that thinking to help services move their processes along. So if we know that Chloe prompts are, they're gone, they're going in the bin, that's C1.4, C1.3, that's not going to happen. How do we expect a group of services to suddenly click into a new mindset? So we're just trying to kind of create that bridge between the old Chloe prompts and the new quality statements, and just help services to move their thinking along. Again, it's kind of some of the stuff we do with our training as well. It's about helping people move and shift their thinking. I mean, CQC started releasing a lot of this way back in kind of April 22, but everyone's busy. But because of what we do, we spent a lot of time looking at the thrilling CQC webinars, looking at all the various outputs, changes to the website, so on and so forth. So we've kind of been in this mindset for about a year and a half now. So it feels kind of like well-worn in shoes for us, but we're aware that when we speak to services, it's only just starting to come into view with the news of the November launch for the South. So we're just trying to share what we've seen, having kind of tracked this and kind of kept a close eye on it over the year and a half, and just trying to create resources that are helpful as we manage the transition period. And the way I described it recently was, you remember when you're at school and there's someone that tries to grow their hair long, and there's that really awkward bit where their hair isn't short and their hair isn't long? That is where the care sector is as we're kind of going between these services. And we're just trying to accelerate that and help people through that tricky stage so they feel a bit more comfortable as we move through to the new system.
I think that's quite a nice analogy, actually, because usually that's the point where people just go and get it cut again.
Well, exactly. And unfortunately, there is no chance to get it cut again. This change is happening. And so it's about making it as smooth a transition as possible. And, I'll hold my hand up. I quite like the framework. I don't think it's perfect. I think there's going to be challenges, and CQC knows that. What I think there is a gap with at the moment is that support and that comms to help services transition over. There's been a lot of work with pilot services, which is great, but 99.9% of services that exist are not part of those pilots. So we're just trying to help with some of the comms and resources and training and stuff that we do, just to help that transition feel a little bit smoother and a little bit less sudden and chaotic.
This week I'm speaking to Sarah Graham. Sarah is an award-winning freelance health journalist and author of Rebel Bodies, A Guide to the Gender Health Gap Revolution, and is also founder of the Hysterical Women blog, specialising in health, gender and feminism. She's written extensively on these subjects for the newspaper, Refinery 29, The Telegraph, Grazia, The Guardian, the British Medical Journal, and many others. She was also a finalist in the 2021 Medical Journalist Association Awards. Sarah, that's quite a bio. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm really excited to see you here today. So I first saw you when I came along to a session you held as part of the York Festival Ideas this summer. And I was absolutely blown away by some of the topics and statistics that you talked about, which are part of your book, which I've got here, Rebel Bodies, A Guide to the Health Gap Revolution. There's so much to talk about in this book. I mean, it covers everything from politics in healthcare to gaslighting, misdiagnosis, and the research that shows there are still such big differences when it comes to men and women's health. So how did you first get into writing on topics covering health, gender, and feminism?
So yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, when I first started out as a journalist, I was writing quite broadly on sort of women's issues. You know, I'd got very interested in feminism as a student. But I guess I found that the ones that I was kind of most drawn to, the more I went along, were around health, particularly interested in mental health, sexual and reproductive health, and debates around kind of reproductive rights, the battle for abortion rights, particularly in the US, but equally in the UK. And so when I went freelance, then that was kind of the obvious area for me to focus on. And yeah, the more I wrote about it, the more I kind of found that I was pulling at threads and just going further and further down this path, looking into the gender health gap and getting more and more frustrated and annoyed about the things that I was finding.
We've got to talk about some of the stats that are in the book. There are obviously quite a lot in there, but some of the ones that really stood out to me were that 14 million working days a year are being lost to the menopause. Endometriosis costs the UK economy 8.2 billion a year, and more than 50% of young women experience period pain bad enough to need medication. Yet a 2020 study into gender disparities in health research funding highlighted that endometriosis and other female dominant conditions are among some of the worst funded by the US National Institutes of Health, while health issues that predominantly affect men are overfunded. What's your thoughts on why this is, and do you see this changing as we continue, or do you think there's still a risk of this being the case in the next 10, 20, 50 years even?
I think it's really complex, and I feel like there's such a lot of catching up to do. It's, I talk in the book about the fact that there are so many research gaps, it's kind of impossible to know where to start really in terms of closing them. But I think we have a healthcare system essentially that throughout history has been built by men for men. And so the focus has been on the issues that affected men. Historically, doctors, researchers, scientists have been mostly men. And so, conditions that mostly affect women have been neglected, have been ignored. I think there's also a bit of an element and I talk about this a lot in the book in lots of different areas where women's issues have been normalized. So there's this idea that periods are supposed to be painful. That's just what it's like. You just have to get used to that as a woman. And that is a really big thing. And it's something that we all internalize as well. Like I was saying with that socialization, we kind of go, oh, well, my mum put up with it and, my grandmother put up with it. And so I just have to put up with it. So I think that is a really big thing. And the other thing that has been spoken about more, I think, in the last few years is this idea that a lot of these issues that we're talking about, endometriosis is a really good example, is considered a benign condition, right? It's not cancerous, it's not life-threatening. But so as a result, it's not seen as a priority. It's not like, oh, well, we're not going to save loads of people's lives by investing in research. It's not like cancer. It's not one of those big things that people, everyone is touched by someone who's been affected by cancer. But actually, the reality is, as you've said, is that these conditions are debilitating. They have a massive impact on people's quality of life. And even if as a government or as funders, you're not interested in people's quality of life, the economic impact is huge. In terms of 50% of the workforce are going through these types of issues. So in terms of like the future, I think things are changing really slowly. And I think to some extent that is inevitable just because of the size of the gap and the amount of catching up there is to do. I do think we're seeing some progress, and certainly it seems to be a little bit more on the agenda, but there's still not enough funding going into women's health. One of the professors that I interviewed about PCOS said that he has colleagues who, when they're applying for research funding to look into PCOS, they have to kind of wrap it up as like metabolic disorders rather than PCOS, because it's just seen as one of these like not very important women's things of women and their ovaries. So I think there's still a huge amount of work to be done there, and I think really investment and getting to the people who make those funding decisions, the people who decide what's important, basically, those are the ones that we need to get to and to influence, because they are setting the agenda for what gets researched and what doesn't.
This week, I am speaking to Dennis McCarthy, who is a regional assessor at NQA. He's also a world-renowned author, aren't you, Dennis?
Yeah, that's correct.
For those who don't know what NQA does, Dennis, could you just provide our listeners an overview of the services that NQA provide?
Yes, NQA are primarily a certification body, which in terms of ISO, we provide various certification management for various standards. So, for example, ISO 9001, which is quality management, ISO 14001, which is environmental management, ISO 45001, which is health and safety, 22301, business continuity, 27001, which is information security. We do a number of standards.
I was going to say we'll be probably here till dinner time.
We will
if we kept reeling off everything that everything that NQA does.
Yes.
So in terms of information security in ISO 27001, then, so what does that mean? Why is that important in an industry like ours in healthcare?
I think it's important in most industries, even more so now. I think with the threats to cybersecurity as a whole, as an umbrella. I think with the healthcare, I think with data protection, particularly ISO 27001, is very, very valuable. It makes the information management systems more robust. It makes your cybersecurity more robust, your internal IT a lot more accountable, but at the same time, it makes them very proactive in trying to stop threats coming in. And it's good internal awareness as well, I think. But with the healthcare, with the amount of data and the sensitivity of data that Red Eye Healthcare may hold with its customers and the health industry as a whole, it's a very valuable tool to have.
Yeah, it is. Like I say, I've been out and done auditing, and it doesn't sometimes get the promotion that it should do. But yes. So in terms of any advice that you could provide our viewers out there, is there any advice that you could provide for those who are looking to go down the certification journey?
Yeah, I think the one word is preparation. I think without a doubt. I think with your certification body like NQA, we see ourselves as more of a partnership. It's a cliche, but that's how well we see ourselves with the clients. So you have initially, I think they need to be prepared for it. They need to make sure that is the correct standard. And by talking to the certification body, the certification body will assist them, telling them which pathway to go down. So if we say ISO 27001 is an example, you go through the process of speaking to our salespeople and our scheduling people to sort of sort out a timescale of when that 27001 can be implemented. and then the preparation behind that. We may help with a gap analysis, and then you have what's called a stage 1, which is really seeing how prepared you are for the upcoming audit. And the stage 2 audit really then is your in-depth audit, which looks at all your systems. And if we take 27,001 as an example, we look at various things like your business context, your leadership, your HR, but at the same time, and more importantly for 27,001, your technical controls that are in there as well.
This week I'm speaking to Sarah Jane Downing. Sarah Jane has been on a campaign journey for the last 8 years following unnecessary breast surgery by Ian Patterson, who was found guilty of wounding patients with intent. Sarah Jane set up a group for fellow survivors in 2015, and they have been campaigning ever since to make sure what happened to them can never happen again. She has also been working with the Department of Health since 2020 to implement the recommendations from the Bishop's inquiry, which still has a way to go, but is a start to informing positive change. Sarah Jane, welcome to the podcast. It's an absolute honour to have you with us today.
It's absolutely delightful to be with you, Justine. Thank you so much for asking me.
So I'm going to go straight into, obviously we've mentioned a little bit in the intro there about what we're going to discuss today. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about your personal experience and what happened back in 2014?
Yes, of course. Yes. In July 2014, I received a letter from Spire Healthcare out of the blue, just to sort of say, please will you come in and see a consultant? And I was rather sort of like, oh my God, how and why? But it said there were grave anomalies in your records and we want to see what happened. And this was referring to I'd had a lumpectomy by Ian Patterson in 1998. And so it was a long time earlier, and it had taken a very long time to try to sort of put it behind me. So to have that bolt out of the blue suddenly was really, really shocking. And I was really frightened and really unnerved about going to see them to find out just exactly what these grave anomalies were. But even more shocked and horrified when I got there and found out. Because because what had happened is at the time when I had seen Patterson, he had told me very convincingly that I had a lump growing very rapidly in my breast, and it was very dangerous and it was growing very quickly and it really urgently needed to come out. So I was very much in the position where I was absolutely terrified out of my mind and didn't really have any kind of idea that there was anything other than that is what I have to do. And I couldn't get a second opinion. I couldn't get him to do a needle aspiration to check for cancer cells. He just told me it's growing very, very rapidly, and soon it's going to break the outline of your breast. So you're going to start to become weird shape, and at that point, once that happens, it's going to be very difficult to remove it, so it's best to have it done now. And to find out in 2014 that all of this was just an absolute load of nonsense, and that the lump that was removed was not in this absolutely desperate state, was absolutely beyond a shock. It was really devastating to know that all that I've been through was entirely for no reason whatsoever. It was just a regular benign lump as I'd had before.
I think, like you said as well, you know, you had that in 1998, and then obviously it's many years later that you kind of getting told that as well. When, you know, like you said, it takes a long time. I mean, you never get over having that. I've got a friend that's been through it, but you kind of start to live your life again and things like that. So I guess to find out all of a sudden after that many years, to almost be transported straight back to that feeling and terror and everything else must have been horrendous.
absolutely. Yes, it was such a shock. It was such a horrible thing to happen. It really did sort of push me right back.
And yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think so. Obviously, you've since set up a group for your fellow survivors, which I think is absolutely amazing. You know, kind of that turning that negativity side of it into trying to do something for absolute good and for positive change. So how have you all helped, you know, use your own experience to try and inform this positive change for the future?
Well, you see, at the time when I found out, there had been a recall of patients in, I think, 2002, 2003, and those were the cancer patients that Ian Patterson had worked on in the NHS and at Spire Healthcare private sector. But we had absolutely no idea that the anomalies in his cancer care, because he was doing this really weird CSM procedure, which was absolutely not what anybody should have been doing ever. It was of his own invention. And so when those people were recalled, the rest of us who turned out to be the unnecessary surgery people, we had absolutely no idea. And it seemed completely unrelated. And so at the point in time when I found out in summer 2014, I spoke to a solicitor and found out that she had got a number of people who were in the same position as me, who weren't cancer survivors, but who had had surgery from Patterson that was unnecessary or wrongful or completely weird. And I very much wanted to reach out to them because I thought, you know, we're in this really, really peculiar position and there's nobody to help us. There's nobody for us because there was a group set up that was set up for the NHS patients. But because we were private patients, we were supposed to have been told that we could join that group, but we were not. And obviously there are the cancer charities and the breast cancer charity. They had a group, but as we were not cancer survivors, we didn't think of trying to sort of join a group that wasn't, you know, for us. And so it was very much the need of thinking, how many other people are in this really, really bizarre situation where you've just heard that all of the care that you thought was care was actually some kind of terrible other. So it was at that point that I reached out to try to get other people together, just really to see if we could share our experience and support each other. So that's how it sort of started. And I think that's the essence, really. We try to sort of be there for other people within the group and to really sort of, I think so much has been, in a way, it's good to know that other people have had the same experience, because I think one of the factors that was very, very much a case for me and for many, many others is that we were so shocked and so we felt so, how was I taken in by this? How did I believe this? How was I so stupid? And that's the thing that has really sort of resonated very strongly with everybody. It's like, you know, why did I believe this? How did I believe this? And so that's one of the aspects that we've really sort of, when the bishop started his inquiry, it was one of the elements that really spoke to him about, you know, that we wanted to be able to sort of reveal something of our own stories and to talk about what had happened, to try to help everybody else to be like, well, you weren't a fool, don't blame yourself. What else could you have believed? Because at the time, everyone was saying, oh, he's an amazing expert, he's fantastic, you know. And everybody was saying, at those hospitals, everyone was saying how great he was. And you didn't hear a word from any of the staff at either hospital, the NHS or the private hospital, saying anything other than, oh, he's such a nice man.